I'll never forget the night my own son looked me in the eye and said, "Dad, either you serve my wife or you leave this house." For a moment, I thought I misheard him. My Ethan, the boy I raised with my bare hands, the boy I worked double shifts for, the boy I stayed up nights helping with school projects, was now standing in front of me like a stranger, repeating his wife's words as if they were gospel. I didn't argue, I didn't raise my voice, I didn't even let them see the way my chest ached like someone had just driven a nail into it. Instead, I smiled. I went to my room, pulled out my old brown suitcase, the same one I'd carried when I moved into their home, and quietly packed my few belongings. And then, without a single word, I walked out their front door. That was 10 days ago. 10 days later, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. I rubbed my eyes, groggy, and glanced at the screen. My heart skipped. There it was, 25 missed calls, all from Ethan. I froze, staring at the number like it was some kind of cruel joke. The same son who told me to serve his wife or leave now seemed desperate to reach me. But why? What could possibly have changed in 10 short days? Let me back up for a second. My name is James Walker. I'm 58 years old, a widower, and until recently, I thought I had a place in my son's home, a place where I could spend the last stretch of my life surrounded by family. I lost my wife, Clara, to cancer 5 years ago. She was my partner, my best friend, the glue that held us all together. When she passed, it felt like the color drained out of my world. The only thing that kept me going was Ethan, my boy. He was 24 back then, just finishing up college, ambitious, and full of plans for his future. I poured everything I had left into making sure he stood on solid ground. I wanted him to have the kind of life Clara and I dreamed for him. So when Ethan called me a year ago and said, "Dad, why don't you move in with us? You shouldn't be alone," my heart lit up. I thought, finally, I wouldn't have to eat dinner by myself anymore. Finally, I'd hear laughter in the house again. But things weren't that simple. Ethan had recently married Melissa. At first, I tried to see the good in her. She was sharp, opinionated, and she carried herself with confidence. Maybe too much confidence. She'd shoot me looks at the dinner table if I asked a second helping of food, or sigh when I left the TV on a little too loud. Little things, you know. Things I told myself didn't matter. I ignored them because I thought Ethan and Melissa were adjusting, and maybe I was just in the way sometimes. I didn't want to be a burden. But then came that night. It was after dinner, a Tuesday. I was sitting in the living room, reading the newspaper. Ethan walked in, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his face pale. He sat across from me, his jaw tight. "Dad," he began, his voice heavy, "Melissa feels like you're not pulling your weight around here. She says you need to, serve her more, help out in ways she needs. Otherwise—" He stopped, swallowing hard. I leaned forward. "Otherwise what, son?" He took a breath. "Otherwise it might be better if you left." For a long moment I just stared at him. I wanted to shout. I wanted to remind him of every sacrifice I had made for him, every time I put his needs above my own. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. Instead, I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because that was the only thing holding back the flood of tears burning behind my eyes. I stood up, walked to my room, and pulled out that suitcase. Ethan didn't say a word. Melissa didn't even look up from her phone. I packed quietly, one shirt after another, folded with a trembling hand. And then I walked out. 10 days later, here I am, staring at my phone, 25 missed calls from the same son who let me walk away like I was nothing. Something had happened, something big. And the truth was, those calls would change everything. When I left my own house after Clara passed, I thought I'd never feel at home anywhere again. For 30 years, she and I built a life brick by brick. Our little 2-story home wasn't fancy, but it was filled with warmth. Clara's laughter echoed in every corner, and her touch was on every detail: her curtains, her garden, the smell of her cooking. After she died, silence took over. Silence so heavy it pressed on my chest each night as I sat at the kitchen table, staring at her empty chair. I tried to fill that silence with routine. Waking up early, fixing myself eggs, walking to the store, chatting with neighbors. But the truth is, once the door closed, I was just an old man in an empty house. No one waiting for me. No one to share a meal with. That's why, when Ethan called me last year, his voice warm with excitement, saying, "Dad, you don't have to live alone anymore. Move in with us. We've got plenty of space." My heart swelled. I remember packing up my things with a strange mix of sorrow and hope. I left behind Clara's house, our house, because I thought maybe this was a new beginning. Maybe, just maybe, I'd get to feel like part of a family again. When I first arrived at Ethan and Melissa's place, everything looked so perfect. Their home was modern, with bright walls and sleek furniture, so different from the cozy clutter Clara loved. I told myself it was just a new chapter. Ethan hugged me at the door, smiling ear to ear. Melissa stood beside him, polite, her smile thin. At first, life under their roof felt almost like a blessing. Dinner together around the table. Football games on Sundays with Ethan, just like old times. I'd sit on the porch in the evening sipping tea, listening to the faint sounds of them laughing inside. But there were small things. Melissa's smile never quite reached her eyes. If I asked her how her day was, she'd give me a clipped answer, then turn her attention back to her phone. If I offered to cook, she'd decline, saying, "That's okay, James. I like things done a certain way." It didn't bother me at first. I figured she was adjusting. A new marriage is hard enough, and now she had her father-in-law in the mix. I wanted to give her grace. But slowly, the cracks widened. One evening, we were sitting at the table for dinner. Melissa had cooked roast chicken, and the smell filled the room. I reached for the mashed potatoes. "Melissa," I said gently, "these are delicious. Could I have a little more?" She sighed, not even looking at me. "You know, James, I'm not running a restaurant. If you want more, maybe you can help in the kitchen next time." Her words cut sharper than I expected. Ethan shifted in his chair, glancing at me nervously, then at her. He gave a little laugh. "Come on, Mel, he's just asking." But I caught the look she gave him, cold, warning, and I realized my son was caught between us, afraid to push back. I smiled, nodded, and quietly took another spoonful without a word. Inside, though, I felt a sting. Not anger, just sadness. I had never once treated Clara's parents like that. Still, I told myself, it's fine, she's young, she'll come around, don't make trouble, James. But the feeling of being an outsider only grew. Melissa would talk about their plans for vacations, dinners with friends, even renovations to the house, and I was never included. I was in the house, but not part of the picture. Ethan, bless his heart, tried. He'd invite me to watch games with him, ask me to tell old stories from when he was a kid. For those moments, I felt needed again. But the tension in the air when Melissa walked in made it clear I wasn't welcome in her world. And yet, I held on. I told myself it was worth enduring, because it meant being close to Ethan and not eating my dinners alone in silence. Looking back now, I realize I was blind. I thought patience would earn me respect. I thought kindness would melt her coldness. But instead, every day chipped a little more off my dignity. And then came the night when Ethan sat me down in the living room, shifting uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. That was the night he spoke the words that shattered what little peace I had left. Living under my son's roof became a daily exercise in patience. I tried to keep my head down, to stay out of the way, to remind myself that this wasn't really my home anymore. But it was impossible not to notice how things shifted. At first, Melissa's comments were subtle, like tiny paper cuts. A remark about how I left dishes in the sink too long. A complaint that I walked too loudly in the mornings. Once, I overheard her telling Ethan, "Your dad doesn't even know how to use the dishwasher. It's like having another child to take care of." I wanted to tell her I'd spent decades fixing machinery twice as complicated as a dishwasher. I wanted to remind her that without me working nights and weekends, Ethan wouldn't have gone to college, wouldn't have this beautiful home. But I swallowed those words. I thought of Clara. She always told me, "James, pick your battles." So I picked none. But Melissa noticed my silence, and I think she mistook it for weakness. One evening, I was sitting in the living room, reading. Melissa came in, dropped her purse on the counter, and without even saying hello said, "James, can you get me a cup of tea?" With honey. Not too hot, I looked up, surprised. Not because making tea was a big deal, but because of the way she said it, like I was a butler she'd hired. Still, I stood, went into the kitchen, and fixed her tea. I handed it to her carefully. She took it without a word of thanks, sipped, then frowned. I said not too hot. Before I could respond, Ethan walked in. He kissed her on the cheek, sat down, and flipped on the TV. Melissa handed him the mug. "Your dad doesn't listen," she said casually. Ethan glanced at me, awkward, then shrugged. "It's fine, Mel." I sat back in my chair, pretending to read, but inside, something cracked. The little requests became regular. Carry the laundry basket upstairs, clean the patio chairs, scrub the bathroom tiles because, in her words, I like it done properly. It wasn't helping out that bothered me. I've never been afraid of work. It was the expectation, the tone, the idea that I was no longer a father, but a servant in my own son's home. The final straw came one Saturday afternoon. I'd just finished mowing the lawn, sweat running down my back, the sun beating down. I came inside, hoping for a glass of water and maybe a quiet rest. Melissa was in the kitchen, scrolling on her phone. Without looking up, she said, "James, can you iron Ethan's shirts for next week? They need to be crisp for his meetings." I paused, wiping my forehead. "Melissa, I'm a guest here. I think ironing Ethan's shirts is something you should handle." That was the first time I ever pushed back. She lowered her phone slowly, her eyes cold. "A guest? You live here, don't you? Guests don't stay for months without paying rent. If you want to be here, James, you'll do your part." Ethan walked in right then, carrying grocery bags. He froze, sensing the tension. Melissa turned to him. "Ethan, talk to your father. He doesn't want to help. I can't live like this." That night after dinner, Ethan sat me down in the living room. His face was pale, his hands fidgeting. "Dad," he began softly, "you know I love you. But Melissa's right. Things aren't working. She feels like you don't respect her." I frowned. "Respect her?" "Ethan, I've done everything she's asked, without complaint. I've tried to stay out of the way. I've tried to—" He cut me off. She feels like you should do more. Help her out, treat her as the head of the house. Otherwise—" His voice cracked. "Otherwise, it might be better if you left." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My own son, my flesh and blood, was telling me to serve his wife or get out. I searched his eyes, desperate for some sign that he didn't mean it. But all I saw was fear, fear of losing her, fear of standing up to her. I whispered, "Ethan, I am your father, not a servant." He looked down. "Dad, please, don't make this harder. Just think about it." That was the moment everything inside me shifted. Years of sacrifice, love, and loyalty collapsed into a single truth. I no longer belonged in my own son's home. And with that realization came a strange calm. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just smiled, stood up, and walked to my room. I pulled out my old brown suitcase. As I folded my clothes and laid them inside, my hands trembled. Not from anger, but from heartbreak. Melissa's laughter drifted from the kitchen. Ethan's voice joined hers. and I realized as I zipped up the suitcase that in their world I had already become invisible. When Ethan told me it might be better if I left, the words didn't echo like a shout. They landed like a whisper, soft but heavy, and sank deep into my chest. I sat there for a long moment, staring at my son. My boy, the same boy whose scraped knees I patched up, whose first Little League game I never missed, whose college graduation I cheered so loud my voice went hoarse. That boy was gone. In his place sat a man who couldn't look me in the eye, repeating his wife's ultimatum as if he had no choice. The silence stretched. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. And then, Melissa's laughter drifted in from the other room, bright and careless, like she'd already won. I could have fought. God knows I wanted to. I wanted to tell Ethan that respect is earned, not demanded. I wanted to remind him of the nights I worked overtime so he could have new shoes, of the mornings I left for work before dawn so he could sleep without worry. But what good would it do? He wasn't ready to hear it. Not then. So instead, I did something that surprised even me. I smiled. It wasn't a joyful smile. It was the kind of smile a man wears when he finally accepts the truth, no matter how bitter. I stood up slowly, my knees aching, and without another word, I walked down the hall to my room. I pulled open the closet and reached for my old brown suitcase, the same one I'd carried when I first moved into their home. I laid it on the bed and began to pack. My shirts folded carefully, my worn work boots, a framed photo of Clara and me from our 20th anniversary. I paused at that photo, my hand lingering over Clara's smile. She would have known what to say, she always did. My hands trembled as I placed it gently between two sweaters, as if protecting her from the cold. In the hallway, I could hear Ethan pacing. His voice was low, speaking to Melissa. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew whose side he was on. When I zipped up the suitcase, the sound was sharp, final. It felt like the closing of a chapter I never thought I'd have to end. I walked out into the living room, suitcase in hand. Ethan looked up. His eyes widened when he saw me. "Dad, what are you doing?" I met his gaze, steady but calm. "What you asked me to do, son." "I'm leaving." He opened his mouth, but no words came. Melissa appeared behind him, leaning against the doorway with her arms crossed. She didn't say a thing, but her eyes told me everything. Satisfaction. I turned to Ethan one last time. "I raised you to stand on your own 2 feet. I hoped you'd grow into a man who knew the value of family. But if this is the choice you've made, then I won't stand in your way." He swallowed hard, his face pale. "Dad, please, don't make it sound like that." I shook my head gently. "I'm not making it sound like anything. I'm simply doing what you told me to do." And with that, I walked to the door. The night air was cool when I stepped outside. The crickets were singing, and somewhere in the distance a dog barked. I stood there for a moment on the porch, suitcase at my side, looking up at the stars. My chest ached, but beneath the pain was something unexpected. Peace. I realized then that dignity is something no one can take from you, unless you give it away. And I wasn't going to give it away, not even for my son. As I walked down the driveway, the gravel crunching under my shoes, I didn't look back. I couldn't. Because if I did, I might lose the strength to keep walking. I spent that first night at a small roadside motel. The sheets smelled faintly of bleach, and the mattress sagged in the middle. But it was mine. My choice. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the buzzing neon light outside the window, and for the first time in months I felt like I could breathe. The next day, I called my brother Daniel. When he heard my voice, he said, "James, where have you been?" "Come stay with me. You know you've always got a place here." I accepted without hesitation. But even as I settled into Daniel's guest room, I couldn't shake the image of Ethan's face when I walked out. Shock, fear, something unspoken lingering in his eyes. I didn't know then what it meant. All I knew was that I'd left with my dignity intact. And sometimes walking away is the only way to be heard. 10 days had passed since I walked out of Ethan's house. 10 days of quiet mornings at my brother Daniel's place, of eating breakfast at a small kitchen table that didn't echo with tension, of sitting on the porch swing at night with nothing but crickets for company. For the first time in months, I felt human again. No one barking orders. No one watching me like I didn't belong. Daniel never asked for anything more than my company. "Your family," he said, clapping me on the back. "That's enough." Then came the morning that changed everything. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing nonstop on the nightstand. The light of dawn spilled through the curtains, painting the room gold. I rubbed my eyes, reached for the phone, and froze. 25 missed calls. All from Ethan. My chest tightened. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the callback button. 25 calls wasn't an accident. Something was wrong. The phone buzzed again, and this time I answered. "Dad," Ethan's voice was frantic, shaky like a boy lost in the dark. "Dad, thank God. Please, I've been trying to reach you. You've got to come back." "Please," I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. "Ethan, slow down. What's happened?" There was a pause, and then his voice cracked. "She's gone, Dad." Melissa left. She packed her bags and walked out. "I don't know what to do. I can't eat. I can't sleep. I need you here. Please, Dad, I need you." For a long moment, I said nothing. My son, the same one who told me to serve his wife or leave, was now begging me to return because she had abandoned him. I agreed to meet him later that day. When I pulled up outside his house, my stomach churned. The place looked the same. Tidy lawn, curtains drawn, but the energy was different. The windows seemed darker, heavier. Ethan opened the door before I could even knock. His face was pale, his eyes red from sleepless nights. He looked smaller somehow, hunched over, his pride stripped away. "Dad," he whispered, his voice hoarse, "I'm so sorry." I was wrong. I stepped inside slowly, my suitcase still in the trunk, unsure if I even wanted to bring it in. The living room was a mess. Clothes scattered, dishes piled in the sink. Melissa's absence was everywhere. Ethan sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. "She said I had to choose, and I chose her. I thought it would make her happy, but it was never enough. Nothing was ever enough. And when I tried to stand up to her, she just left." His shoulders shook as he spoke. "I thought I was building a family, but I lost the only real family I ever had." I sat down across from him, my hands clasped tight. My heart ached, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Ethan," I said softly, "when you asked me to serve her or leave, do you know what that felt like? It wasn't just about chores or respect, it was about my place in your life. I wasn't your father anymore. I was an inconvenience you were too afraid to defend." He looked up, tears streaming down his face. "I know, Dad, and I hate myself for it. I let her push me into treating you like a stranger. You gave me everything, and I threw it away. Please, give me another chance." For a moment, I wanted to say yes immediately, to hug him, to forgive, to rush back into the role of the father who fixes everything. But something inside me stopped. I leaned forward. "Son, I love you. That will never change. But love doesn't mean I erase what happened. I can forgive you, but I won't come back here to live as if nothing happened. If I step into this house again, it'll be on my terms with respect. Do you understand?" Ethan nodded desperately. "Yes, Dad. Anything. I can't lose you, too." Now, in that moment, watching my son break down was both the hardest and the most powerful moment of my life. I realized that walking away had forced him to see what he'd become. My silence spoke louder than any shouting match ever could, and though it shattered me to leave, It gave him the space to realize the truth. Family is not about control. It's about love, respect, and loyalty. As I left that evening, I didn't take my suitcase inside. I told Ethan I would visit often, but I would not move back in. He needed to rebuild trust, and I needed to hold on to the dignity I'd fought so hard to reclaim. That night, as I lay in Daniel's guest room, I finally understood something. Sometimes, the only way to teach the people you love is to let them feel your absence. And Ethan had felt it. Driving back to my brother Daniel's house that evening, I kept glancing at the empty passenger seat beside me. For years, I'd imagined Ethan sitting there, smiling, telling me about work, about life, about the grandchildren I hoped I'd one day hold. Instead, I'd left him behind, slumped on his couch, broken and ashamed. The truth was, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt heavy, because as a father, you don't raise your child just to walk away from them. You raise them hoping they'll stand taller than you, hoping they'll make choices that honor what you poured into them. And when they fall short, a part of you aches as though you failed too. But deep down, I knew this wasn't failure. It was a lesson. For both of us. The next few days, Ethan called often. Not the frantic, desperate calls of before, but softer ones. "Dad, how are you doing? Have you eaten? I miss having you around. I'm trying to clean up the house." It's harder than I thought. His words were small, but they mattered. For the first time, I heard humility in his voice. Not the arrogance of a man hiding behind his wife, but the vulnerability of a son realizing he'd pushed away the one person who would never abandon him. I didn't rush to comfort him. Instead, I answered honestly. "I'm fine, son. I'm learning to enjoy the quiet. I miss you too. But I need time. You'll figure it out." Responsibility isn't easy, but it makes you stronger. Every call was a reminder that my absence was teaching him something my presence never could. One Saturday afternoon, Ethan came to visit me at Daniel's place. He looked thinner, his shoulders hunched, but there was something different in his eyes. He hugged me tightly, like he was afraid I'd slip away again. "Dad, I've been thinking about everything you said. I realize now I put Melissa above everything, even above the man who raised me, and I was wrong. If she couldn't respect you, she didn't respect me either." I studied him, searching for sincerity, and for the first time in months I saw it. My son wasn't just apologizing, he was learning. "Ethan," I said quietly, "love makes us blind sometimes. I understand that, but blind love without respect will eat you alive. You see that now, don't you?" He nodded. "I do. And I promise you, Dad, it won't happen again." From that day forward, our relationship slowly began to mend. I didn't move back into his house. I couldn't. My dignity demanded I build my own space. But Ethan came to see me often. We shared meals. We watched games again. And for the first time, he asked questions about my life, not just as his father, but as a man. He wanted to know how I coped after Clara died. He wanted to hear stories about my younger days, about struggles I never shared when he was a boy. It was as though losing Melissa had cracked something open inside him, and through that crack, light finally got in. Looking back, I don't regret walking out that night. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the truest. Because here's what I've learned. Family isn't about blood alone. It's about how we treat each other when no one else is watching. Respect is the foundation. Without it, love collapses under its own weight. I learned that as a father, sometimes the best way to teach your child is not by protecting them from pain, but by letting them feel it. Ethan had to lose me, if only for a while, to realize my value, and he learned that loyalty to a partner should never mean betraying the people who built the foundation of your life. Marriage is a union, not a prison. If love demands that you dishonor your parents, that love isn't love at all, it's control. So, where are we now? I live quietly at Daniel's place, though I'm saving to get my own small apartment. Ethan visits every week. He calls every few days. The distance between us has shrunk, not because I gave in, but because I stood firm. And as for Melissa, I haven't heard from her since. Maybe one day she'll regret the choices she made. Maybe not. That's no longer my burden to carry. What matters is this. My son and I are rebuilding, brick by brick, with honesty and respect. It's slower than I'd like, but it's real. If you've listened to my story, I want you to take this with you. Never let anyone, no matter who they are, strip you of your dignity. Stand firm in who you are. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to fight, but to walk away. Because walking away doesn't always mean the end. Sometimes it's the only way back to what truly matters. So tell me, if you were in my shoes, would you have stayed and served, or would you have walked away? And that's my story. A story about a father who chose dignity over disrespect, and a son who had to lose in order to learn. If there's one thing I want you to take away, it's this. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's strength. It's the only way to show others your true value. Now, I'd love to hear from you. If you were in my shoes, would you have stayed and served, or would you have walked away? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your perspective means a lot. If this story touched you, if it made you think about family, love, or respect in a new way, then do me a favor. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories just like this one. Your support helps me keep telling these stories, and I promise there are many more that will keep you on the edge of your seat, make you laugh, or even bring a tear to your eye. Thanks for watching, and remember, hold on to your dignity no matter what.